Hey there YouTube, I'm Ikitsu, this is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Age of Wonders Planetfall. So today we're going to be talking about Syndicate combined with the, oh god, what are these called? The Synthesis. This is a terrible combination to try and talk about, but anyway, yeah, Synthesis Syndicate. Synthesis is actually probably my favorite of the different types of techs here, and the reason for that is because they're really fun to integrate into just about every sort of faction out there. Their abilities are not super generic, although they have got some very generic ones, and they've also got some really powerful and meaningful ones. They just all around are a great sort of thing to play there. So let's dive into what they've got here. So first of all, you're going to be really happy with cyber optimization for the worker integration. That one's going to be paying dividends throughout the game with this faction because they're less capable of getting those really strong production bonuses in the early game as compared to something like the Vanguard. Makes it quite a good pickup there. Same thing for both Society 2.0 as well as Total War Automation. Both of those are going to also give you extra production to a certain degree there. It's mostly energy focused, but you are going to be able to produce more units through that sort of energy cycle there. You'll notice that my energy in this particular game here is absolutely crazy. I'm not actually that high on upkeep in this particular match, but that's not too weird. Again, as much as I would love to also have indentured servitude for the extra plus 40% production, it's so late game that I didn't really get a chance to deploy that in this particular instance. I find that when you're already really high in production, it makes it much more likely that you're going to be short on stuff like Cosmite rather than on stuff like production by the late game anyway, so not as necessary. Of course, you could start slamming out things that do not have Cosmite cost there, just basic units, but not really my sort of thing there. So I think that the stuff that you're getting from Synthesis is a really great complement to Syndicate, simply because Syndicate normally can't get those really great production bonuses when you need them. Next up, let's talk about the military structure. So unlike with the previous one, this is a situation where you're looking at a fairly powerful arc-type weapon system. Now, the arc weapon system for the hacker for the Syndicate is the Breeze SMG, which is more powerful than standard Hasher SMG. The reason is that this gives you a bypass for 1 armor, 1 shield, reducing people's defenses essentially by 2. This is actually a really big bonus there. You can almost think of this as having a default damage output of 13, although of course it doesn't scale quite as nicely with the percent bonuses, but still, this is really quite powerful. Not only that, but your leader is capable of giving you an additional point of armor and shield bypass, meaning that you're going to be capable of dealing damage to things even if they're quite resistant to you normally. What's more, the Syndicate does actually have access to the arc tree, and this is actually pretty powerful for this particular faction, and I do think that it's sort of worth going down this path here. Previously, I've mentioned that the Psionic Tree I'm less fond of because it forces you to do some weird stuff for your primary damage output, and the nice thing about this is that Arc lets you sort of put your Denture to work there, the Enforcers, although in this particular match I didn't really use very many of those, to gain access to those really powerful sort of Arc abilities, but it also means that you can sort of throw that onto your hackers, but you can also use that for some other things that are going to be pretty interesting. So anyhow, let's take a look at some of these. We haven't really taken a look at the Arc weapon modules at all here. So static buildup modules and the Arc Retaliation, I'm not a huge fan of it in this particular situation. Adding these to the hacker does improve its battle capabilities a little bit there, but honestly speaking, at this point in time, you're better off with things like the Guardian Demon Shell, Targeting Demon Shell, and stuff like that, because they're really cheap and they're really effective. They'll make it so that you can deal some more damage, be a bit more reliable with your crits and stuff like that. It's just pretty cheap, pretty good ones. If you're up against a lot of melee stuff, Arc Retaliation can be extremely powerful, in which case I would potentially say that you should take that one. But static buildup I generally find you don't need, especially with the how hard hitting the hacker is, especially the Syndicate hackers. You're not necessarily going to need the static buildup module to get that repeated damage hit that you get from that sort of module. Further along, though, you can get access to the Arc Impact module. This one's actually really good. There's going to be lots of instances where adding that to your hacker is going to make them a lot more deadly, and it's quite nice. But realistically speaking, the thing about Arc is that Neuroelectric Disruptors, as soon as you hit this one, Arc weapons go immediately from being kind of okay to being absolutely crazy. Now, I don't actually use the Arc Extension module in the case of combining with Synthesis, because there's something I like to do. You'll probably know what that is, but the Stun module is absolutely fantastic. The ability to sort of keep the enemy locked down means that even if you are, for some reason, doing relatively low damage, and with these kinds of mods, you probably won't be doing low damage, you'll probably be doing decent damage, you can get a lot of work done. Next up, you've got access to the Positron Storm stuff here. I don't think I've ever found a legitimately good time to use these things here. There probably is, I just can't find a good one to do that. In particular, for this faction, if I really wanted that effect, I feel like it's stronger to take the avatars, because they're capable of doing a sort of similar effect there that changes instead of being a cone. And I find that I don't have an easy time getting cones on the right sort of area there. Although, obviously, this can be used effectively if you position really well. Often I find if even if I position perfectly, I'll still hit my own troops a little bit there. Next up is the Positronic Discharge Shield. This one's actually potentially really powerful here. I don't typically like using it just because of how late it comes, but there is a really strong argument to make for using this one just as a strong defensive module. I think that there's a couple builds that could definitely make use of that one. Unlike the Arc Discharge mod, unfortunately, this one can only be applied to units that have already got an arc-based attack there, but it's not too bad even in that sort of case there, because you've got plenty of good units that are capable of doing that here. So the network node here, it's basically as we saw for the Vanguard. Unfortunately, you're not going to be seeing as many good synergies out of this as you were seeing with the Vanguard one, but it sort of makes up for that in the fact that the Hacker, as well as the Avatar, although I don't think you need the Avatar at all in this case they're just not really that necessary, but the two of those units are much stronger because of their access to arc weapons module upgrades. In terms of their other ones, the Guardian Demon Shell and Targeting Demon Shell are just fantastic early game mods still for things like your Indentured, as well as your snipers, just any of those sort of guys, your guild assassins, any of those guys benefits quite nicely from those. You can put it pretty much on anybody and it's going to be somewhat useful. I think that the Indentured in particular do well with the Targeting Demon Shell, because it can be a first level upgrade that you can get extremely fast to get yourself up to like a 20% critical rate, which is really high in the early game. Pretty good sort of mod all around there. The Guardian Demon Shell, unless you're up against a lot of melee, this one's going to be pretty okay, and can be used in conjunction with the Positron Discharge Shield for a ton of evasion capability if you really wanted to go that route. It could be something that you decide to do. Combine that as well with something else that gives you a little bit of dodge chance there. I believe that the one was... Actually, yeah, here it is. The Adaptive Camouflage Protector. You could end up with an absolutely crazy amount of evasion if you really wanted to go that route, and I think that that's perfectly fine if you want to sort of do something that's kind of funny that way. Personally speaking, I think going for a little bit more offense is a little bit more effective, but it will depend on sort of what you want to do there. Compromise module, again, this I find is a little bit too situational, but if you are up against a lot of cyborg and mechanical type units, especially if you're up against, say, assembly, this becomes fantastic in those particular instances, way stronger than the static discharge one. If you're not up against those, of course, it's completely useless. It's not going to do anything. So you do have to make sure you're up against the right kind of opponents for the compromise module to make sense. With the changes to the way that the Cosmite cost for upgrades works now, though, this only costs the energy if you want to switch out a unit to having compromise modules, assuming they've already got a mod that you can switch it out for. So that makes this actually a much stronger module than it used to be, because previously, if I was up against, say, Xenoplague Amazons and I had a bunch of compromise modules on, to switch out, I'd have to spend a bunch of Cosmite. That doesn't really apply anymore. I could switch out something like, say, this thing and switch out for the Targeting Demon Shell and end up paying just the energy cost, which is still potentially expensive, but is nowhere near as bad, especially because Synthesis is capable of getting a humongous amount of energy. Same sort of thing for the Incapacitate Demon Shell here. This one's difficult to consistently use, but again, it's a little bit stronger now than it used to be just because you're capable of getting access to this otherwise. The thing about this, though, is that you really don't need the Incapacitate Demon Shell with this combination, because you're capable of getting stuns on your weapon systems, and that's realistically speaking what you're ultimately going to want to be using. So this is the only complete dud, I would say, for this particular faction. Next up, you get access to the Total Network total network integration. Again, there's no bad choice as far as total network integration goes. Anything that can take it, it's going to benefit a lot from this particular module. It's a really, really powerful one. It's a really good one. Great with network nodes where you're capable of bringing units back to life after they've been destroyed, and then healing them back up to full with the network nodes if you really need to, or just retreating them so that they can get a little bit of time there, or doing any number of things to get them healed up. But not having to sort of lose a lot of your units thanks to the total network integration. Just fantastic module all around. And of course, lastly, you've got access to the deployable malware daemon. Because this faction has access to arc weapons, the malware daemon goes from being a nuisance that's capable of chipping your enemy down and preventing them from getting around the map the way that they want to, or getting flank shots against them that are surprisingly deadly. This is actually a major threat to your opponent there. The deployable malware daemon I've tested with certain modules. For some reason, for example, it cannot use the arc extension module. Mine didn't work with the arc retaliation defense either. I'm not sure which mods ultimately work, but I do know for a fact that the stun module one does, and I do know for a fact that you can also add the total network integration to them. So let's take a look at what our build here is. If I can find my particular armies, or we can just use this panel here. So first of all, we get access to our network links, and you can see that this is what I've got for this one here. And unfortunately, the arc retaliation defense was not working as far as I'm aware with my deployable malware demons. And you know, this included things that were running up and fighting them in melee, so I'm pretty sure it was not working. I just wanted to test that out there. So don't use this combination. But if I want to switch this out here, there's not as much. This guy is not using the same sort of rounds as the other types of units there. Probably throw on something like, say, the Guardian Demon Shell or the Targeting Demon Shell or whatever there. But basically what this does is it lets my Malware Demon come back to life there. Pretty powerful effect, but this isn't the best one. Avatar, again, I don't find that this unit is necessarily that great in this case, so I didn't bother taking it. There are situations in sort of fringe ways that make it work, but nothing that I was really too interested there. Anyway, Syndicate Guild Assassin here. We started off with just the, for some reason I just started off with this, I'm not sure why, but later on we get access to the Fibrillator, you get the Arc Extension module as well as the Stun module, and the Total Network Integration. The thing is that the Total Network Integration really helps Guild Assassins. This gives you not just resistance to stagger, it gives you all the way up to immune to stagger, which means you have to be hit by massive impact before you're staggered. That means that these Guild Assassins are really hard to knock out of a shot, and that was something that's severely lacking in the normal Syndicate roster. So normally you might be able to get some resistance to stagger. It's very hard to get immunity to stagger on your snipers with this faction, and this does that for you. So absolutely fantastic. Means that they're capable of getting their shots off more consistently and makes them a lot more viable and a lot more powerful. I kind of actually wish I was using more of these guys. Stun module and the Arc Extension module lets you sort of deal a little bit more damage out of these guys. Normally they're sort of limited by the fact that they can only fire one shot there. This kind of lets them fire like 1.5 shots. Makes them pretty good all around there. Next up, we got access to our... Over here, we're not really bothering with our Enforcers or Wraths or Overseers in this case all that much there. The one Overseer we started off with, I did throw this on it just so that comes back, but it's not that important. For these guys, again, because of how late things come in, also I screwed up these guys' build a little bit, but this is actually fine. Yeah, the way that we were building these guys, I ended up switching out of the previous one and going with the Malware Demons. This is actually the wrong module. This should be the... Probably, I'm not actually sure what I would put on right now here. Arc Extension module anyway, probably, but we got access to the deployable Malware Demon, we got access to their extension module and the stun module, so they're capable of flinging these guys out there, and those guys are then capable of going around the map tasering enemies, and the deployable Malware Demon adopts the stun module, which means that those enemies are going to be getting stunned all along the way there. It's absolutely a fantastic sort of module. Makes it so that they're very, very capable. And next up we got access to our hackers, which are sort of the core of our experience here. Our hackers are a little bit more up in the enemy's face there, typically I found. So what we've got here is, again, the deployable Malware Demon, the stun module, and the total network integration. And that total network integration not only lets these guys come back to life there, it also lets those deployable Malware Demons come back to life there. In addition, with the stun module, it means that these guys can get up to the enemy there, slowly start whittling them down for that first round, but once they start getting those full shots, once they start going full damage mode, they're capable of doing a surprising amount. And since I'm not going to be dealing damage that first round anyway, since I'm throwing the deployable Malware Demon, these guys just don't really have to worry about that first round. next round, you know, that's when the repeating attacks come in really, really handy there. Very powerful build, I find. There are other ways to build these guys. One of the things I like about Synthesis, though, is that it really frees you up. You're capable of building a lot more diversity of types of units than I was with the previous types. Even with the text that I've got here, if I really wanted to, I could switch myself out to using something like, say, the Syndicate Enforcers to a certain extent here. Like if I took these guys and threw on the Arc Retaliation Defense, because they'll be in close quarters combat a lot more often there. Throw on the Guardian Demon Shell maybe so that they can get in close and not die. Throw on Total Network Integration. These guys are not going to be the best killers out there, but they're going to be tanky. They're going to be able to get into the enemy there very reliably with this combination and just start pummeling the enemy down there. And if you try and fight back against them, you're probably going to stun yourself, and you're stunning yourself against a very tough, durable unit there. So this becomes quite a nightmare to sort of deal with if you're using something like this. These modules here are just really, really good all-around ones, no matter what you're sort of doing there. Even if I wanted to go something like, say, the Mirage or whatever like that, Subjugator, this guy, I mean, I still don't think this guy would be that great, but you could still go with this sort of thing there. Could go with, yeah, I don't even know what the hell. I could throw that on there, I guess, or something like that. I don't know. These guys benefit from these modules. It's not a very good unit, so like it suffers from that, but it's a very expensive unit as well in terms of Cosmite. But it still gets a lot of mileage out of those modules there. Now, if I really wanted to with this guy, I could throw on something like, say, the stun module. I don't believe I can even put the arc module on this guy since he's already got an arcing attack there. Yep, that is correct there. He's not capable of even equipping that even if I wanted to. But I can throw on something like, say, this and then maybe this and then maybe this or something like that. Just run him into the enemy because he is pretty durable by default there. This makes him a little bit more durable. I can make him even more durable so that he can just run straight into the enemy like suicide style, I guess, or something like that. I'm not sure if it's worth the cost here, but this could be a potentially pretty dangerous build, even given how lousy that sort of unit there is. That you can sort of use just about anything, and they're going to find some like core useful things out of these guys. If I'm up against a lot of mech, I can still throw the Compromise module, although I'm not sure I would put it on this guy necessarily. But you can get a lot of sort of value out of these kinds of units here, and if there's certain combinations of units, like I'm up against Assembly, they're trying to like melee rush my tanks and I just teleport straight in the middle of them, this build is going to really mess up their day quite badly because it's just weapon attacks. It doesn't have to be like an arc one. It can still work with their psionic cannon there, and that makes them more vulnerable to the arc retaliation defense. So that combination works, even though it's kind of janky there. Like, you can do just about anything you can imagine with this. It's a really, really sort of fantastic kind of thing there. You could go with the Mirage here. I could throw on the Spatial Accelerator. I could throw on the Guardian Demon Shell as a combination, and I think that I could throw on the... Well, it probably looks like it would have to be Total Network Integration, so this becomes a really tanky sort of thing here. Not capable of dealing much damage. If I wanted to do a little bit of damage, I could throw on the Targeting Demon Shell, or I could be annoying, throw on the Arc Retaliation Defense or something like that, and this becomes a quite powerful vehicle, capable of doing quite a lot of damage at close quarters by, you know, forcing the enemy to deal with it and stunning them that way, while still being fairly hard to hit. Like, this becomes quite difficult to hit there, which you would think you wouldn't want with the Arc Retaliation Defense, but you want to get hit a little bit with the Arc Retaliation Defense. If you're getting hit way too much, it still sucks pretty badly. But yeah, no, I mean, synthesis mods are just like really, really amazingly powerful, even, and sort of can synergize with just about anything because you're allowed to put them on just about anything. And because of that, you can end up with lots of really fun and interesting different ways of playing. Like, maybe you throw malware demons on everything like I like to do, in which case you're capable of getting stacks there that are capable of doing quite a lot of stuff there. We can take a look at this one. These guys throw down their sort of malware demons. They've got their ability to deal some damage and deal some stun there. I guess this is not the worst sort of module here. Like, the reason is that if they're reducing their arc defense, it makes it more likely they can land the stun, so I guess that's useful in that sort of sense there. And then these guys, like their arc extension module, their total network integration, this combination is really, really strong for snipers. For these guys, we've got this sort of combination here, although yeah, this makes them so versatile. They're capable of doing a lot there. They're capable of doing a lot of damage. They've got a lot of presence on the field. I wish that stack had a couple network nodes, but we have got other stacks elsewhere with network nodes, if I can find out where the hell they are. I've got units all over the bloody map this time here. This one here, yeah, these guys got in a pretty big fight over here, but got access to our stacks like this here. We've got malware demons all over the place here, network arc retaliation defense, all that sort of stuff there. And the combination, I think, is... The thing about this is that there's no set-in-stone combinations with Synthesis, no matter what you're playing as. There's just always going to be something interesting that you can find that you can do. Hackers, I think, are a little bit stronger with this faction than they are with Vanguard, just because being able to access those ARC weapon modules does open up some pretty powerful combinations and some powerful opportunities for them that you're not capable of getting with Synthesis, or with Vanguard, sorry. But it's just an all-around sort of great secret tech, and it's probably my favorite. So there's some heavy bias there, but I definitely think that this is one of the ones where you should definitely give this one a bit of a try there, just because like being able to use the hackers and the malware demons with those ARC upgrades makes it a lot more interesting. You could try the same with the Assembly, who also have access to arc weapons. The thing about the Assembly and their arc weapons is that their upgrade path, it's not quite as friendly for arc as it is for this faction. Their base trooper does not use arc weapons. Their engineer support type unit does, their scout does, some other units do, but realistically speaking, they're actually also heavily influenced by kinetic damage, and I think a lot of their primary damage dealers ultimately deal kinetic damage rather than electric, or rather than arc, whereas with this faction, your early game heavy hitting damage dealers, your indentured, your guild assassins, stuff like that, are going to benefit from those early game arc modules. Now, the other thing is that the hacker is more powerful for the Syndicate as compared to the Assembly. The Assembly hacker is, in my opinion, substantially weaker than the Syndicate hacker, and the reason is primarily because the Breach SMG is a really, really powerful upgrade as compared to the standard one. Other than that, though, like network connectivity, I'd argue the network link is actually substantially stronger for the Assembly. So if you were to go Assembly Synthesis, there are some distinct advantages over the Syndicate because of that, but if you're really just going for that arc damage, it's quite nice to be able to do that. And another thing is, like, you probably are not going to be able to cap out both kinetic and arc and, you know, a lot of your synthesis tree there, so you're going to be missing out on one of your tech trees. With this sort of situation here, you're capable of getting pretty much everything that you need. So that is, for the most part, everything that we're going to be talking about for the Vanguard synthesis, or sorry, the Syndicate synthesis combination here. One of my favorite secret technologies is just really, really strong. I think that it's got some of the better economic bonuses in the game there, if not the best economic bonuses there. The +1 to all ranks through Total War Automation, absolutely fantastic ability there. The extra cash that you're capable of getting from Society 2.0, as well as the extra happiness, especially since they boosted happiness, all really, really good there. To the point where I just didn't even bother getting stuff like clandestine practices yet again, because it's such weak operations by contrast, especially here. Worker integration is so strong that I don't even remember really relying that much on noble diplomats, because it's just not as necessary here. The fact that you're capable of getting extra operations as Syndicate, because they get bonus slots for that, also does help with this sort of combination, because most combinations I don't really care too much about having a ton of operations. With Synthesis, I do. They have some of the best in the game there, and you're absolutely going to want to slot them in whenever you get the chance there. So yeah, that pretty much is everything I've got to say about the Syndicate synthesis combination there. Really, really strong, capable of using that sort of arc to a really strong advantage because of those malware demons, capable of doing a lot of very, very powerful stuff there. And I think that's probably one of the better combinations out there, for just because it's good for the early game, it's good for the mid game, good for the late game. So anyway, that's going to be our video for today. Hope you found this one enjoyable. And of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.